Okay, so we're going to begin talking today about Ruth. And as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I actually had a choice of three possible lessons. So I sort of combined two. And hopefully you'll find that this one is interesting. But meanwhile, I haven't brought it up yet. 1 minute. Sorry. Yeah, I should start all over again. Okay, here we go. So this is our 22nd class, in case you're interested. And I'm just going to share the screen with you. Share screen. So we're starting out with a triptych, all right? And you can see what's in the triptych is you have here Ruth and Naomi. Then here you have Naomi, not Naomi, you have probably Boaz and Ruth. And here you have Ruth, and notice here's Naomi holding the little baby at the end, right? And so the very first chapter is very interesting because the first chapter starts out by saying, in the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land, and a man of Bethlehem in Judah, with his wife and 2 sons, went to reside in the country of Moab, right? And that sort of reminds us a little bit today of, a lot of people are leaving the country in Israel because things are getting to be difficult. And also even in America, there are people I understand who are leaving America to live abroad, even going to Canada, which is closer, because things are getting tough. So it's very interesting. Now, today it's much easier to go from one land to another. But in ancient times, here you have a map showing where Moab is down here, all right? And here's Bethlehem. And of course, it looks very close on the map, but it's not, it's not. So here's, so you go from Bethlehem to Moab, all right? And then afterwards, when they go back, they're going back from Moab to Bethlehem. And the irony is, Bethlehem means what in Hebrew?
Bread. House of
it means a house of bread, exactly. Okay, so that's in itself is interesting. The great Bible scholar Phyllis Tribble had this to say about Ruth. Toby, would you like to read it?
Sure. While the book of Ruth centers around the story of Naomi, Ruth's mother-in-law, Ruth's narrative has its own significance. Ruth is a Moabite immigrant to Judea due to her first and second marriages and struggles to adjust to the culture. She expresses much deference to Naomi and is often forced into subservience to her second husband, Boaz. Modern analysis both criticize and celebrate her actions and discuss how her story illustrates the patriarchal structure. However, she is exalted in the Bible for her devotion and as the great-grandmother of David. Feminist readings of Ruth diverge sharply. One perspective faults her for perfection, for being compliant, self-effacing, and a mere pawn of Naomi. Another analysis praises her for faithfulness, for making radical moves, for risking dangerous acts, and for being a devoted partner of Naomi. Still another sees her used to espouse the patriarchal values of marriage and progeny, and then discarded. The counter-view sees her challenging patriarchy even while trapped within it. Her foreign identity also receives opposing interpretations. One view holds that the story affirms this Moabite woman, embracing her fully within Judah as the great-grandmother of David. Another view holds that the story rejects this Moabite woman, erasing her at the end by giving her child to Naomi, and so according David a pure genealogy.
Okay, what do you think about all of this?
They can't decide.
You can't decide. Okay.
They can't decide. Is she good or is she bad? Is she a feminist? Is she not? Is she faithful? Is she not?
the book has so many facets to it, and and every year when we read the book of Ruth, it's just, it's mind-boggling. And I personally, over the years, have looked at the book in different ways. I actually, in an article that I wrote, which was widely reprinted, about trafficking in women, I see her also possibly as a trafficked woman, because she's going from one nation to another, and she's sort of, we don't think of her as being trafficked, but to a certain degree she is. She's being brought, her mother-in-law, sends her off to sleep with this, strange guy, and ends up having a happy ending. But on the other hand, she's being used, right? She's being used and that's similar to the last phrase here, which erasing her at the end by giving her child to Naomi. So it's very interesting. What does Ruth think about all of this? We'll come to that in a minute when we get to a little bit afterwards, when we come towards the end. So I have here two interesting poems by Barbara Hollander, one which we'll read now, and then one we'll read afterwards. Stevie, would you like to read this? The first one?
Sure. God is good. My mother told me, marry a Jewish boy, Ruthie. They take care of their women. You'll never work a day. Just watch out for your mother-in-law. I converted, of course. Converted? I was a stranger to myself. Naomi never said much, but often she just happened to be doing the very things I'd been wondering about. God is good, she'd say, rain or shine, no matter what. So when my husband died, I thought I'd brought evil into the house. Her kindness only made things worse. Go home, darling, she said. Start over. You're young. You'll forget. Home? What home? The only thing familiar in my life was this little Mamala, starting off alone to pick up the pieces, back to Bethlehem. How could I leave her? It wasn't exactly the life I thought I'd chosen. How the girls in Moab would have laughed to see me grubbing in the field where Boaz found me. Could I know Naomi'd gone to him? Boaz, you lucky old bachelor, she said. God is good. He sent you a nice Jewish girl.
Okay, so this is really, it's sort of funny. She has another take on Naomi afterwards, but we'll look at that afterwards. But so this is one of her poems, and then you also have this idea here of a connection with her and what could have happened to her had she not gone together with Naomi. Now, you have to understand the placement of the book of Ruth in our Bible is with all the other Megillot, right? It's between Shir HaShirim, which is read on Pesach, and then comes Ruth, which is read on Shavuot, and then comes Eicha, Lamentations, which is read on Tisha B'Av, and then, of course, the other two books as well. But, right, in the Catholic Bible, because of the beginning, let's go back to the beginning, which is in the days when the judges ruled, okay? So in the Catholic Bible, you have the placement of the book of Ruth right after the book of Judges. Okay, keep that in mind. Now, how does the book of Judges end? It ends with the story of the concubine of Gibeah in Judges 19, which, if you remember, is a horrible story. And she is she is brought back by her husband and ends up going to having hospitality, so-called, in Beit Lechem. And the terrible things happens to her there. So you have Beit Lechem in a place both at the end of the book of Judges, where this terrible thing happens to they call her Beth, all right, because she's nameless, so they give her the name Beth. And then you have the story of Ruth. So by having that particular placement, you have something very interesting going on. The end of the book of Judges, which also ends up in civil war, and also the rape of many, many other women. I don't think we've done the concubine of Gibeah yet this year. We'll probably do it another time. But so in this particular person, Deirdre Brewer, where she writes about voices of outrage against rape, textual evidence in Judges 19, she makes a comparison. And she says that this intertextuality that you have between the end of Judges and the Ruth story is as such. So you have here the tragedy of Beth's rape and death is followed by hope through the story of another desolate woman of Bethlehem who has a name and a voice and a daughter-in-law named Ruth. From a desolate woman of Bethlehem comes the messianic line of David, right? But also out of Bethlehem emerge is two things, both the greatest atrocity, right? What happens to the woman in Judges 19, and the greatest hope. I think it's very interesting here. You could look for her paper online. But anyway, I think that this is a very, very interesting commentary that she has here. And as I mentioned earlier in the book, I look at her from the source of trafficking, and so you could. I mentioned that earlier when she says in chapter 3, right? Daughter, I must seek a home for you where you may be happy. Now here's our kinsman Boaz, whose girls you were close to, right? And she sends her off there, right? This is chapter 3. Chapter 2 is when she goes, she goes there into the fields, but this is chapter 3 already, right? And she's going to be winnowing barley, and so go bathe, anoint yourself, dress up, right? Don't tell him who you are until he has finished eating and drinking. When he lies down, note the place where he lies down and go over and uncover his feet, right? And lie down. Now, you could read this innocently, or you could read uncover his feet as a euphemism for his precious jewels, because the Hebrew is margaliot, right? So his precious jewels, right? And anyway, no one really knows. Did she sleep with him? Did she not? What was she doing? We don't really know. And you can read it either way, all right? And when he wakes up, he gives her a present. So in other words, this is a woman who has given herself, presumably, and she goes back. And then Naomi asks her, how is it with you, daughter? She told her all that the man had done for her, and she added, he gave me these 6 measures of barley, saying to you, do not go back to your mother-in-law empty-handed. And Naomi said, stay here, daughter, till you learn how the matter turns out. For the man will not rest, but will settle the matter today. So what we have here is a transaction, right? She gives herself in return for something. And later on, the transaction will be that he will be purchasing her. And that's what happens. All right. So this is really very interesting. Similar to the story of Tamar, which we've looked at many times, where both of them end up being the ancestor of King David, and both of them have this very strange relationship that Tamar with Yehudah, who tricks him into, whatever. He sleeps with her, and then he claims she's a prostitute. She has prostituted herself. He almost kills her, and then he says, she's more of a tzaddik than I am. This is the story of Ruth, of Tamar and Judah, and so in both cases you have the objectification of women, and you also have in my article on Jewish sources and trafficking in women, you also have Abraham pimping Sarah and Lot's daughters being pimped to protect himself, right? If you remember, to save himself, he says. And you could even argue that Mordecai pimps Esther. So in other words, you have a lot of pimping, if you want to read it that way, among, you might not like that. I mean, that's not your Sunday school version of what's going on. So if you want to react negatively to what I've said, you feel free, but if not, I'll continue. Okay, so now Naomi, now coming back to Phyllis Tribble, Naomi, let's have another reader. Susan Sveris, you want to read?
Okay. Naomi is featured prominently in the Hebrew Bible, and in her stories, she is portrayed as a woman who both challenges and conforms to patriarchal expectations. Over the course of her stories, she has a complicated relationship with God, sometimes blaming God for her issues or concluding that God has forsaken her. Her stories, which appear in the Book of Ruth, concern her struggle to survive with her daughter-in-law Ruth. Feminist assessments of Naomi diverge widely, depending upon the cultural, social, ideological, and experiential biases of readers. A sampling includes the following. Naomi is a cipher for male values that find fulfillment for women in marriage and children. In contrast to the loss of status for childless widows in patriarchy, Naomi achieves importance as a mother-in-law and an independent character. Naomi is an overbearing, interfering, and domineering mother-in-law. Naomi is a caring, gracious, and altruistic mother-in-law. Naomi, the Judean, rejects Ruth and Orpah because she is a Moabite. Naomi embraces Ruth the Moabite within the family of Judah. Naomi and Ruth are rivals, with Naomi eventually achieving the greater prestige. Naomi and Ruth are friends, indeed sister-like, each seeking the good of the other in a world over which they have little control. Naomi schemes, connives, and manipulates. Naomi plans, reflects, and executes. Naomi is an embittered old woman who denounces God for her troubles, but fails to thank the deity when she recovers. Naomi is a profound figure of faith who experiences God as enemy, but then wrestles blessing from adversity. All such disparate judgments attest to Naomi's commanding, if ambiguous, presence in one of the few biblical stories focused on women.
Okay, so this is a lot, again, this is a lot to take in, right?
Sure.
But it's really amazing when you think about it, right? All these possibilities here. And again, over the years, each time I see her, differently. So here's a, wait, so we have two poems. Let's look at the Hollander one. This is the second one. And then afterwards, we'll look at okay. Louise, you want to read this one?
God is good. He's made me a grandmother. Live and be well, little man. Grow big, grow strong. Just when I think I'm too weary to bother and too old to start over, you come along. Such pleasure in the house. Who would have thought that widow harvest Boaz gathered in was ripe for joy, or that your little heart could make my bitter blood run sweet again? You're a blessed miracle. Ask your mommy, singing to herself like a nesting bird. When my friends say a son's born to Naomi, she smiles at me and never says a word. But I tell them Naomi's given birth to a daughter in her old age, my Ruth.
Okay. Isn't that lovely?
Yeah, that's nice.
It's really lovely. And, you could just imagine Barbara Hollander projecting her own, becoming a new grandmother into this poem. Remember, when we talk about Midrash in general, that you could have, I don't know who studied with me in the past and when I've done this, but there are two types of Midrash. One is what we call exegesis, which comes from the text, and then there's what you could call eisegesis, where you read yourself into the text, right? And this, I think, is a lovely example of eisegesis, where you have you're now a grandmother, and then you hunt around for some sort of story, and then you write yourself into the stories. I think that's really lovely. Here's another one, which is a little bit harder to read. It's by Catherine Hellerstein. All right. And maybe Norman, could you read this? Is it too small?
You called on me?
Yeah.
Okay. Naomi, call me bitter. The path grows stonier. The hills are steep, and the sheep and goats graze on the prickly brush. On terraced plots cling olive trees. Their leaves sigh ashy melodies of my return. I walked this path 10 years ago, going up, away from Bethlehem, whose walls now glisten where the road dips and branches out, a maze of what I've lost and what my God has gained. 10 years ago, I had to leave behind this starving puzzle of the ways of God. I was young then. My husband, hungry for a better life, trudged at my side. Our sons walked, dreaming of their suppers in Moab. High noon, the sun is strong. It finds my face, although I want to hide how old I am, how much I've lost. I'm not alone. There is Ruth, but how can I, without my husband, sons, be coming home? The women peer out from their market stalls, their courtyard gates, at Ruth concealed beside me in her foreign veil, and ask, Naomi, is that you? I spit. Do not call me Naomi, pleasant name, but call me bitter, Mara, for my God dealt bitterly with me. He emptied me of all my fullness. I have nothing now.
Okay, so this actually, I could have read this at the beginning, of the, at the start, but I think it's worthwhile, when we're seeing her in all these different ways. There's a lot of art coming up. And then we'll also get to, so here you could see some of the art. This is in a 1322 tripartite machzor. Notice the bird's heads here. See the bird's heads? Right, this is also sometimes known as the bird's head machzor. So you have here the barley and the grains here, right? Here's Avner Moria, who I think Women's League brought him years ago to. I didn't know him before then, and so I brought him to mind. Here you have very interesting, right? What you have here, presumably. It's hard to know who's who here, but perhaps this is Ophrah, and then this is Naomi and Ruth going off. Anyway, I think it's very interesting. The phrase there is, let's see if I can read the phrase. Ami, I can't really read it. Your God is my God. That's the phrase in Hebrew there. Here's another one, right? Here's another one, which also very modern and has everything in here. It's you have the king ending up with the king, right? The king, and here's the baby. Here's a baby, and again, wherever you go, I will go. You have that here in the middle here, and you have a dance of the two of them, or perhaps is that a male and a female? It's hard to tell, but that's what happens with modern art. Here we have quite clearly. What's happening here is Naomi. If you ever wondered how did they walk all the way? Well, here this answers your question. It's going all that long distance away. So here you have Naomi sitting on the donkey with all the stuff in the background, and she's pushing her away, telling her to leave, but we know that she doesn't. And here you have another one. Naomi urging Ruth to depart. You could see here really that Naomi is much older, and Ruth looks very innocent. Look at their hands here. Here she's pushing her away, and look at Ruth's hands here opening up, and also the light is focused on her. It's photo gravure, right? Late 19th century, which I guess was a technique in those days. Here's Ruth in Boaz's field, right? And here we have a modern picture of Hannah Helen, who has a lot of very interesting art on her website. And here you can see all the sheaves of wheat, just like you have in your background, Toby. You can use this picture also. And here you have a very religious looking, right, I think she's an Orthodox woman, Hanukkah. So notice he has a kippah on his head. Right? And you have, she's dressed very, very like an Orthodox woman. Notice she has something on her head, and he looks to be praying here, and she's really touching. Notice here's his feet, right? And look where her hands are. It's not clear exactly where they're placed. She leaves that up to our imagination. I'm assuming, by the way, that you all know the book of Ruth. If not, please go to the synagogue on Shabbat and read it. Not on Shabbat, on Shavuot. It's a fabulous book. And here's another picture also by the same Hannah Helen. And I think another one as well. These are all her imaginary stories. And here you have a Mark Chagall. He leaves nothing to the imagination here, right? Boaz wakes up and he sees Ruth at his, again, quotation mark, feet, all right? And so according to the commentary here is following Naomi's advice, Ruth has nudged Boaz into a position where he has to propose to her, right? And here's a red sun in the top, it says right hand, but it's left here, left hand corner. Actually, I guess to you, it's your right hand. For me, it's my left hand, but okay. Where he must propose, all right? And it's a paean to love and sexual joy. They wake up in the morning and they're surrounded by grain, fruitfulness. Both of them seem to be naked. Chagall has no doubts about what has occurred the night before, right? Even if the Bible demurs on this point. In other words, and Ruth is very happy. And Boaz, look at him, he's soaring in ecstasy on top there, So there's nothing left there for your imagination. Here's Boaz giving her, again, notice the difference in dress that we have here. Boaz giving her, he's clearly an old man with a beard, and she's dressed, like a European, of course, and he's giving her the wheat, a generous amount of wheat. Here's this is also Hannah Helen from before, and again another Mark Chagall, and you have here, right? Perhaps we don't know what's happening, right? It's a real contrast to this one, right? And this is 1960. And this one also in 1960, all right? And he's sleeping, right? And Ruth is not. Her eyes are open, her breasts are visible. It says here, her face shows that she, God bless her, is up to mischief. Let's look at her face. Here you can see her breasts, okay. Anyway, and here you have a moon. So this is before, right? This is before. And her face is bright with expectation. I probably should have reversed the order. I don't know if I'll use this in the future, but anyway, I just reversed the order right now. And so we have a moon here as opposed to the sun. This is the before moment. Okay. Before we go on, does anyone, I just brought you a little excerpt from a story I wrote many years ago. I think I had it last year in my blog. You could read the whole story on online in my book. If you will have my signatures, my books are all available online, and I think this story is in there because I wrote it many years ago. Just two little excerpts from the book. Barbara, just Ruth's story, okay?
Ruth's story. She's taken my baby. She acts as if Obed is hers. I guess he is in a sense. I would never have gotten this far with Boaz if not for her push. Why did I follow her back? I miss my best friend Orpah so much. I wish she had come with me, and then I wouldn't be so lonely. All I am is a milk machine, and I have to do it in secret, so Naomi can pretend she is nursing Obed. I wonder if they understand the irony of his name. I am the slave, the wet nurse who works behind the scenes while she gets the glory. The last words I ever said of consequence were those in which I committed myself to follow her, to have her people be my people. But she's used me. She brags about me. She says her daughter-in-law is better than 7 sons, but she never refers to me by name. I will never forgive her for that long period of silence when I followed her, always 10 steps behind on that long trip from Moab.
Jill, would you continue reading?
To them, I am always Ruth the Moabite. My identity to them is that of a convert, and I have never been fully accepted. She's right. I'm better to her than 7 sons. And what sons? Those sickly men. Or but I married Malone and Shilan. Even their names implied disease. They were used up after 10 years, and they weren't potent enough to give us sons. Orpah was smarter than me and went back, but I decided to take my chances, try my luck in a new place. You would think in a society such as this, I would be honored by having a son, but the honor was taken away from me by Naomi. Boaz is of no use either. He's either in the fields or with his men. He thinks of me as a daughter that he has to protect. He can't believe his luck that at his age, a woman took interest in him and that he finally became a father to a male child. But he gets no satisfaction from Obed either, since our child is always with Naomi and she is not even his biological grandmother.
Okay, so this is a somewhat cynical look. The whole modern midrash that I wrote many years ago was very cynical. So here you could see that here's Naomi with the baby inside this. This is again Hannah Helen. I thought she has these very interesting pictures. And here she's in this pomegranate, which is a sign of fertility. And up here you have David with his harp, right? Here's another picture of Naomi. Here's Naomi with the baby, and here's Obed, and here's Ruth. It says here Boaz stand. This must be a maidservant, all right? And in the background, you can barely see him, all right? See Boaz all the way in the background, all right? So in the background, you could see Boaz. So that fits in to a certain degree with my story. She's looking at, Naomi, who's claiming the baby for herself, right? And the whole focus is on the baby. But also Naomi is the one who's holding on to the baby. Look at her hands, right? And look at her face. Right? Her dream has come through, but look at Ruth's face. Ruth is showing love, but there's also a little bit of, and Boaz is all the way in the back. He has almost like nothing to do with this whole story. And here's a close-up from that painting, right? And here's another picture of again, interesting, isn't it? Really, it's a beautiful picture. And in the background, you have the vineyards where it looks more like vineyards than wheat fields, but very, very pastoral. Of course, this looks like velvet. I don't think you'd be willing. Okay, so now we're coming to a modern midrash by Chaviva Ner David, right? I don't know if you know of Chaviva Ner David, but she lives in Hanaton, and she's written many books. She's a scholar, and she also runs a mikvah in Hanaton. When people are converted in Israel by the conservative movement, by the Masorti movement, they have no place to go. The Orthodox people won't let them go into their mikvahs. So there's a mikvah in Hanaton. And there, by the way, there's also a mikvah in Omer where we are as well. So there in the north, there's a place for them to go. And So she's written about that, and she also writes very often in the Times of Israel. You can follow her as well. So she's written a lot of interesting things. And it says here she's the director of this Masorti Mikvah at Kibbutz Hanaton in the Galilee. And so she has a contribution in Praise Her Works. I've used this book very often. It was edited by Penina Edelman, which takes each verse from Eshet Chayil, right, Woman of Valor, takes each verse and then assigns each verse to a different woman. So her verse was Rabot Banot Asu Chayil Ba'at Alit Al Kulana. Many women have done well, but you surpass them all. And then in the Midrash HaGadol, it says that that's Ruth. It's Ruth who merited that David and his righteous offspring were to be her descendants. Rabbi Yochanan said, why Ruth? Because David would come from her whose soul was so full, he would sing to God in songs and praises. So this is the premise of the Midrash that she wrote. And as you know, I also have a Midrash in this book, and I've used Edelman's book many times. And so there David asks a question. What was it about Ruth the Moabite that made her worthy of being the mother of the Messianic line, in opposition to the biblical decree that a Moabite should never enter the people of Israel, right? And this is the phrase in Deuteronomy 23, right? No Ammonite nor Moabite shall come into the Lord's assembly. Even his 10th generation shall not come into the Lord's. Now, how do you possibly explain about Ruth? And not only does she come in, but she is the ancestress of King David. How do you explain that? They explain here because they didn't greet you with bread and water. Okay, whatever. And they even try to curse you. They hired Balaam to curse them. So in other words, not only should you not accept them, but look at verse 7, you shall not seek their well-being and their good all your days forever. So in other words, she asked this question, what's so special about Ruth the Moabite? And in her, she looks at some of the verses. First of all, the Talmud says, okay, it's a male Moabite, not a female Moabite. Okay, so we stop, no problem, okay? We solve that solution easily enough, all right? Also, Ruth is a parallel to Abraham, all right? Just like, God tells him, Lech lecha, right? Go, to where I will show you, et cetera, et cetera. She says, wherever you go, I'll go. Wherever you lodge, I'll lodge. Just like Abram, who was told by God, go to the land that I will show you. And so she also exemplifies, like Abraham, chesed. So this is what Chaviva says at the beginning of her midrash to explain why she's accepted. And also she has, as an introduction to her midrash, she says, again, she's much more like Abraham than Lot, right? Lot is her true blood ancestor, right? She doesn't descend from Abraham, right? She descends from Lot. But Lot's sense of hospitality was not as good as Abraham's, all right? So her chesed is much greater. You know the word chesed. Chesed is like compassion, care, going beyond yourself. The word chasid comes from the word chesed, right? And we very often associate chesed with tzedakah, but it's not quite the same word, because tzedakah, the root of the word tzedakah is tzedek. Tzedek is what has to be done, whereas chesed is doing something that you don't necessarily have to do, but it comes out from you. So she does things that she doesn't have to do, all right? And finally, the whole idea of the book of Ruth transforms the prohibition in Deuteronomy to one based not on ancestry, but on character, okay? So that because of Ruth's character, which is not Moabite, right? The men are like Moabites and they shouldn't come in. but she's not a male Moabite. She's a woman, and because of her character, she is not a Moabite, and she's essentially a Hebrew. So she's allowed to enter into the nation. So what do you think, before we read the Midrash, what do you think? Let me just stop for a minute. What do you think of all of that? Do you buy it? No comments?
Yeah, no, I think it's relevant. I mean, and the fact that you can overcome your your ancestry by the way you behave. I think that's like, what is it, nurture over nature type of decision.
Right. So that it's really beautiful, right? It's beautiful. You're not condemned to always be, what you were born into, and I think that's very important, right? And I like your analogy of nurture versus nature. In other words, you're not, it's not like everything's written. It's not like predestination, right? There
Right.
is possibility, right? Anybody else want to comment? Okay, so let me see how many readers do we need? 1, 2, 3, 4. Just 4 readers. Okay, so let me share the screen again. Okay, so Barbara, Susan, Louise, and Geraldine, welcome. And Geraldine, you'll read the last one. Okay, so has everyone had a chance to read? I haven't paid attention. Yes, okay. Okie doke. So here we go.
Ruth speaks. As far back as I can remember, I did not feel at home among my people. My giving nature did not match what was presented as virtuous in my culture. Excuse me. Humans are a selfish breed, my father would tell me. You have to look out for yourself because no one else will. But my heart told me there must be another way, so I searched for role models who could show me the other way, and then I met Naomi. When I first saw Naomi, she was nursing her sick husband, Elimelech. I watched her carry him out of the house to feel the warm sun on his almost translucent skin. This, my heart told me, is the other way that I've been searching for. So I offered my help. I came every day to help Naomi with her husband. She did not want to leave him alone, and her sons needed to look out after their livelihoods. She was unable to leave the house until they came home. I would come to stay with Elimelech while she went out to get food or to see to other needs outside of the house. It was not easy to convince Naomi to let herself be helped, but really she had no choice, as there were things she needed to attend to outside the house, even if for the good of her family. Soon I brought my childhood friend Orpah along as well, for a bit of company, and because I wanted to expose her to Naomi's ways. Even when Naomi was at home, we stayed and helped her, mostly because we wanted a chance to watch her and listen to her musings.
When Elimelech was not listening, she would tell us of her regrets. I should never have agreed to leave our home and our people. I knew it was wrong to take advantage of our fortunate position and leave while others starved. If anything, as I told Elimelech, we should just go to gather enough food to bring back with us for the others. But he assured me we would not be gone long. He said that we had to look out for our family first, and this I could understand. But once we settled in Moab, and life was materially good here, not so much of a struggle as it was back home, I knew he would never leave. I thought about going back myself, taking the boys, but then my husband ill, and now there is no choice. My husband fell ill, and now there is no choice. I could consider leaving him could consider leaving him when he was well, but I cannot leave him in this condition. He is my husband, after all. She nursed him for years until he finally breathed his last breath. By then we were all family. Her sons were grown. It was obvious that we would marry them. I think I was in love with Naomi as much as Malon. I was in love with their way of life, what they thought to be most important. They taught me a new word, chesed, which was not even in the vocabulary of the culture I came from.
10 years passed, and neither Orpah nor I conceived. This was painful to all of us, and if not for Naomi, I am not sure I would have made it through those years. She showed me how I could transform this desire to nurture and care for a child, which was at the source of my very being, into chesed. Our home became an outpost of chesed in Moab. No one knew what to make of it. We served food to the poor and cared for the sick, while Mahlon and Chilion were out all day working. They brought home the money, and we poured it into our house of chesed, but they didn't mind. After all, they were not only the sons of Elimelech, but also the sons of Naomi. Then came the terrible accident. On their way home from work, bandits attacked Mahlon and Chilion. They were left bleeding on the side of the road, and no one came to help them. They bled to death. After all those years in Naomi's home, I was shocked. How could this happen? What kind of human being would leave two men to bleed to death on the side of a road? And then I remembered that this was how I was raised, and then I knew that I had to leave.
So when Naomi told me to go back to my mother's house, I could think of no fate worse than that. I could not bear the thought of Naomi living on her own. How would she take care of herself in her old age? And how could I bear never hearing from her again? Even more important, how could I stay in this place where there is no Hesed? I went with Naomi back to the land of Judah, despite her pleas that I return home. She was worried about my future. She was right. I knew life would not be easy for me there. Israelites are not supposed to marry Moabites. Malone and Chilion did so only because they had no choice. Besides, Naomi allowed it. She said Orpah and I were Israelites at heart, but she warned me that this might not be the way others would see it. When we first arrived in Bethlehem, I was treated like a stranger. Ruth, the Moabite, they all called me. Then I met Boaz. He noticed me gleaning in his field. He told his reapers to deal kindly with me, and he invited me to eat with them all. He sensed my Israelite heart. He perceived my chesed. And when I told this to Naomi, her face lit up. He sees in you what I did, she said. He sees that you are a daughter of Abraham. Now go to him, and he will redeem us. So I did, and so he did. My womb was opened after all those years, and now we have a house of chesed in Judah. Me, Boaz, Naomi, Obed, our son.
Thank you. So we're ending on a very positive note. I think it's not a bad idea, to have a totally uncynical look, which you have here. And I think, it's a you could see all these different takes, all these possibilities of seeing them as, but there's something in the story that just draws people to it, and you could read what you want into it with or without commentary. It's a beautifully written book. If you're not familiar with the book, now you should be curious about it and just sit down and read it. It's a very easy read. Read it more than once. Every year we read it in the synagogue on Shavuot. Why on Shavuot?
The barley harvest.
Because of the harvest.
Harvest, yeah.
So this is why we read it on Shavuot, because of the harvest scene. And but there's also, it's associated with the holiday, but again, it's also associated with the period of the judges. And during the period of the judges, the whole book, just coming back to what I said at the beginning, besides the terrible ending of the book of Judges, right? But the whole book of Judges, it was written to make one point. Anyone remember what the point was of the entire book of Judges? It's a terrible point, actually. You need a king.
Oh, right.
Right? You need a king. There was lawlessness in the land because there was no king. So the whole book is, one can argue, it's, if you remember, we also talked about Achsa, who was, who bargained with her father for land. So it starts with a strong woman at the beginning, and then it ends with the terrible happenings of the rape, and not only the rape of and killing of the concubine, but the tribe of Benjamin is almost decimated, and there's a civil war, and in order for things to continue, right? In order for things to continue, there's more rapes, right? There are more rapes so that the Benjamin tribe could stay alive. So you have here this whole idea of a book written to show that you need a king. And now you have Ruth. And what happens at the end of Ruth?
David.
Okay. Born in Bethlehem. Right now we know of 2 babies born in Bethlehem. We're not talking about the other one. We're talking about the baby who is born in Bethlehem, who will enter into and become King David. Okay, so I think you have a very interesting, I'm going to stop the. Does anyone have any comment about what we just discussed before I?
So in honor of, I don't know whether anybody saw it in the news today, but in honor of Shavuot, they wrote a story about the fact that we don't have a head of some department, and therefore no conversions are being signed.
Oh my
And
gosh.
there's like 290 some people who went through the whole thing and don't have the certificate.
Oh, okay.
And they're also doing it in the army. So they've got a bunch of lone soldiers who came to convert within the army, and they can't get anything signed.
Okay. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, because that's exactly the point that the book of Ruth is making, right? That all you have to do to convert is you don't have to be baptized, right? You don't have to go into the mikvah. All you have to do is be faithful. You're accepted because of your character. You don't have to go to an intricate conversion. And that's really an amazing contradiction to what you just pointed out right now. So that's really, thank you. It's a great way to end, because the book really is a very optimistic book. I mean, you could read into it what you want, as you saw, but the bottom line is that the message really is one of chesed. Everyone shows chesed, right? Boaz shows chesed to Ruth, right? He also shows chesed to Naomi, his kinsperson. She will end up getting back whatever property they left behind, right? By through the marriage. Ruth, of course, shows chesed, and Naomi also takes Ruth under her wing, right? And so she also shows. So everyone is showing chesed to each other in the. And it's a beautiful book if you read it through the eyes of just chesed. Okay, so I wish all of you a Chag Shavuot Sameach. Have a good holiday. In Israel, we only have one day. You have 2, so enjoy both days. Don't eat too much cheesecake. That's what they call it here. Here, it's advertised as everyone's advertising cheese in Israel, right? You're all over the place. That's everyone is advertising here. Okay, so Chag Sameach. Let me just stop.
Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you, Naomi. Everybody have a happy Shavuos. Naomi, what does that plate say on your shelf? On the top of your shelf, what does that plate say?
Oseh Shalom b'mromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Amen. Amen. Good night.
Perfect way to end.
Bye-bye.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Have a good